Have you ever just stopped and wondered how a country like India actually works? I mean, you've got over 2,000 ethnic groups, more than 120 major languages. It's one of the most diverse places on the entire planet. By all accounts, it could have easily fragmented, but it hasn't. It's still a single, unified country. So what's the secret sauce? Well, the answer lies in one powerful political idea: federalism. Let's dive in and see how this amazing system keeps it all together.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll look at a tale of two nations to see just how high the stakes are when it comes to sharing power. Then, we'll dive into India's specific constitutional blueprint. After that, we'll get into the real-world struggles over power and check out how the system uses some pretty special rules to manage all that diversity. It all comes down to a constant and fascinating balancing act.
All right, first things first. To really get why federalism is such a big deal, we need to look at what happens when diverse countries get it right and, well, what happens when they get it tragically wrong. The stakes really couldn't be any higher. To see why this all matters so much, just look at these two completely different paths. On one hand, you have Sri Lanka. The government there went with what's called majoritarianism. Basically, the majority community calls all the shots. They favored the Sinhala majority, which pushed the Tamil minority to the margins. The result? A devastating decades-long civil war. Now, on the other hand, you have Belgium. They chose a path of accommodation. They literally wrote into their constitution that both the Dutch and French-speaking communities would have equal representation. Power was shared. And their results? Unity and peace. This contrast is just stark. It makes it crystal clear why a system that accommodates everyone is so incredibly important.
So what is this system of accommodation really? Well, that's federalism. You can think of it as a constitutional design for sharing power. It's a formal set of rules where power isn't all held in one central place. Instead, it's divided between a national government and regional governments, like states. It's the official answer to the challenge of diversity, and the goal is always to get that Belgian outcome of peace and unity.
Okay, so that's the theory, but how did India's founders actually apply this principle in the real world? Let's take a look at the country's specific federal blueprint, the actual rules of the game designed to manage its absolutely mind-boggling diversity. So, any country that calls itself a federation has a few things that are totally non-negotiable. First, you need at least two levels of government, like the central government in Delhi and the state governments. And here's the crucial part. While they govern the same citizens, each level has its own turf, its own area of authority, or what we call jurisdiction. These rules aren't just suggestions, they are spelled out in a written constitution. But rules need a referee. That's where an independent judiciary comes in, to be the neutral umpire when there are disagreements. This whole structure is built to do two things at once: protect national unity and, at the very same time, make room for all that regional diversity.
Which, of course, brings up a huge question. I mean, in any system where you're sharing power, you're going to have disagreements. It's inevitable. So who breaks the tie? Who settles the fight?
And that's exactly where the independent judiciary comes in. It plays the role of the umpire. If there's a fight between the central government and a state, or even between two different states, the courts step in. Their job is to look at the Constitution and make sure everyone is playing by the rules and staying in their lane. Honestly, this judicial oversight is kind of the glue that holds the entire federal structure together. Now look, a constitution is just a blueprint, right? It's just words on paper. The real test of federalism is how it works in practice, in the messy, day-to-day push and pull for power between the center and the states. And here's the thing, that balance of power isn't set in stone, not at all. It's a living, breathing negotiation, a constant tug of war. And probably the most visible, most powerful example of this in India is the continuous demand for new states, usually based on a shared culture or language. This isn't a sign of the system breaking, it's a sign of federalism adapting in real time. And you can see this process playing out right across India's history. The map of India has been redrawn multiple times. It really kicked off after the States Reorganization Commission in 1953. Then you see Bombay state splitting into Gujarat and Maharashtra in 1960, Punjab being divided in 1966, and it continues right into the modern era, 3 new states in 2000, and as recently as 2014, Telangana was created from Andhra Pradesh to meet those unique regional demands. Now, you might think, wait a minute, wouldn't creating states based on language just tear the country apart? And honestly, that was a huge fear for some of India's early leaders. But what actually happened was the complete opposite. It turns out, formally recognizing these linguistic identities actually made national unity stronger.
Why? Well, it made government administration way easier, and it brought democracy closer to people in a language they actually understood. It proved that you could be proudly Kannadiga and proudly Indian, or proudly Bengali and proudly Indian. The two identities weren't in conflict at all. They actually reinforced each other.
This brings us to one of the most clever and, let's be honest, complex features of India's federal system. This idea that to keep the country whole, you don't have to treat every single part exactly the same way.
So, let me ask you a direct question. Does the Indian Constitution treat every single state in the Union with the exact same set of powers and rules?
And the short answer is nope, not even close. And that is completely by design. It's a concept called asymmetrical federalism. The Constitution itself recognizes that some states, because of their unique history or their social fabric, need special provisions and special powers. It's a really flexible approach that values practical accommodation over some kind of rigid, one-size-fits-all rule. The classic example of this, of course, was the special status that used to be granted to Jammu and Kashmir, which grew out of the very specific historical circumstances of it joining India. Now, this table shows the situation before 2019, and you can see how different it was. Unlike other states, it had its own separate constitution. For most central laws to apply there, the state government had to agree. You couldn't even impose a financial emergency. The key point here isn't just about this one example, but what it shows. That India's federalism is sophisticated enough to create different rules for different parts of the country, all in the service of keeping the whole thing together.
So when you put all these pieces together, what do you get? What does it all mean? It shows that federalism in India isn't just some dry topic in a civics textbook. It is the nation's living, breathing, and constantly evolving operating system.
At the end of the day, this is the most important thing to remember. Indian federalism isn't a final destination, some perfect state that's been achieved. It's a dynamic process. It's the constant, delicate, and sometimes difficult work of balancing the need for a strong, unified nation with the very real, very powerful dreams and aspirations of all its diverse regions. It's the magic formula that lets India be many things all at once, and yet, somehow, remain one nation.
So, for over 70 years, federalism has been India's answer to the incredible challenges of language, culture, and regional identity. It's worked. But the world doesn't stand still. New questions are already bubbling up. Questions about economic inequality between states, fights over shared resources like water, and the challenges of digital governance. The continued success of this great Indian experiment is going to depend on how this incredible federal formula adapts to face the questions of tomorrow.